Welcome to Your Mac Life for a Wednesday, October 22nd, 2014, show number 1029. I am Shawn King. This is Your Mac Life. Thank you guys very much for joining us, whether you're tuned in via the archive or you're tuned in live right now at the moment. As always, you can join us in the IRC chat room. A nice Monty down there in Atlanta, Georgia, set up the chat room just for you folks who aren't used to chat rooms. You go to the website, yourmaclifeshow.com. Right there on the front page below the video of my smiling happy face is a little form you fill out, a little window you fill out, you put your name in there, click the button, and boom, it drops you into the IRC chat room. It's easy to do. We always encourage folks to join us in the IRC chat room. You can ask questions there of me, of other listeners. You can just enjoy yourself. You don't have to participate if you don't want to, but you're missing out on half the fun of the show if you're not. Terry is in there. Terry hasn't joined us. I don't know if Terry has ever joined us for our live show. She was just saying that she's usually in the archive, but she's in the IRC tonight. So thank you very much for joining us, Terry. On tonight's show, we're going to be talking to our friend Jim Dalrymple from The Loop at loopinsight.com about his iPad Air 2 and iPad Mini 3 review. We'll talk to him about that. We'll talk to him about the Apple earnings. We'll talk to him about a whole bunch of other stuff that's going on. We're also going to have a little bit of a eulogy for the late lamented, not on a hiatus, Macworld Expo. But first up, to our friends and listeners, Sherry is in the IRC chat room and others in the nation's capital, Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. Awful day for Canadians, a worse day for Ontarians, and an even worse day for those folks in Ottawa. You may have heard that there was a shooting in the nation's capital today. Terrible scenes, terrible video that we saw on the news, and our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone involved and affected by this. I think the best comment I heard about it was that there was a rumor and intimation that some peoples may be targeting members of the armed forces, and therefore local bases have said that armed forces personnel should not wear their uniforms in public when they're not on duty anymore. And one soldier said, "This will make me wear my uniform even more," because he's proud to wear the uniform of the Canadian Armed Forces. And it was a great thing to see. The other thing that was neat to see, I haven't watched him on a regular basis or any long-term basis since I obviously left Canada and moved back. A guy named Peter Mansbridge. He's on the CBC National News. He's been doing the National. It's called the National here in Canada. CBC, by the way, for those folks who don't know, is Canada's national broadcaster. Not government run, but government supported, sponsored, or not supported and sponsored, depending on your point of view. But it's the national broadcaster here in Canada. And the nightly main news broadcast at 10 or 11, depending on where you live, is called The National. And Peter Mansbridge is our Walter Cronkite. He has that same sort of, for you folks old enough to remember Walter Cronkite, he has that kind of weight in Canadian news, that kind of gravitas. He's the first guy we turn to in Canada when we want to hear the news. And it was really interesting flipping back and forth from the other national broadcasters, CTV and CBC, and seeing the different tone of the two broadcasts. Mansbridge and CBC were the last ones to report on the unfortunate death of the soldier, the reservist who was shot and killed at the War Memorial. But Mansbridge explained that we didn't want to go with a rumor. We wanted to go with something that we had confirmed independently. So, and Sly's just saying that our Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, is remarking on the news model. I haven't seen that yet. The other thing that was really interesting was listening and watching folks on Facebook and Twitter commenting on the differences in the way the Canadian media reported this versus the way the American media reported this. And someone posted this great screenshot of from CNN, the headline in what's that, 40-point type, terrified Capitol, versus the CBC News using a normal-sized headline, soldier dies after Parliament Hill attack, gunman also shot dead. It goes without saying that the way the CBC reports this is the way it should be done. These events are sensational enough, and sensational in the older term of the word. You don't have to make it worse, CNN. You don't have to jazz it up It doesn't need jazzing it up. Cable news network. That's your name. Give me the news. Don't pimp it. Don't promote it. Don't blow it out of proportion. Keep it to what you know and keep it to what's reasonable. Terrified capital in 80-point type is not any of those things. CNN, you could learn from the CBC. A lot of folks could learn from the CBC. But it was the other interesting aspect of this, and I want to get your opinion on this from both the Canadians who are tuned in, but also the Americans. Here is a political cartoon from, I think it's the Montreal Gazette political cartoonist. That's a powerful image. It has been called inappropriate and much worse. And I can see your point of view if you think that image is inappropriate. I don't agree with you, but I understand how you could say that. One of the issues is that we here in Canada have been lucky enough to not have to deal with these kind of things on the scale that our American friends have had to. On the amount of carnage that these events happen. They do happen in Canada. Anyone who says these things don't happen in Canada is lying to you. They happen at a lesser scale and less often. For us, this was very much a nation's capital kind of thing. The hits at the heart of the country. No, this was not Canada's 911. Anyone who says that is a moron. It's not that bad. This will not shut down Parliament Hill. Parliament Hill, if you ever had a chance to go to Ottawa, as much as I will tease Ottawa, it's a fairly boring, typical government town. The Parliament buildings are beautiful buildings. Very much a Gothic style. Inside of them is just spectacular. Really, really cool buildings to be inside of. Not just for Canadians, but if you're a fan of architecture, you'd love the Parliament buildings. The center block, our version of Big Ben, is called the Peace Tower. It's ironic that's where the gunman entered the building, was underneath the Peace Tower. I don't recommend going to Ottawa. Sherry, my apologies, but there's a lot nicer places in Canada. But if you have to go to Ottawa, if you're there for a conference or if you're there for visiting the area, it's a nice town. Especially in the springtime with the tulips on the boulevards, it can be a nice, pretty town. Do not go to Ottawa in the wintertime. You will die. All right? There should be something at the borders of Ottawa that says, do not enter unless you own more than one parka. Because, oh my dear sweet baby Jesus, it gets cold there. And I said in Amplified this morning, Ottawa, I think I read somewhere many years ago, Ottawa is the coldest national capital in the world. That includes Moscow, Oslo, Helsinki. It's a cold place. I was there, I think it was in high school or shortly after high school, between Christmas and New Year's, visiting family and friends. And it got to minus 50. Now, don't ask me if that's Celsius or Fahrenheit, because it doesn't matter. At minus 40, it's the same. 40 Celsius and 40 Fahrenheit, the same temperature. But at minus 50, it no longer matters whether you're talking Fahrenheit or Celsius. It's insanely cold. Bone-chilling cold. Literally dangerous cold. Where the exposed skin can freeze in minutes cold. So unless you're from Minnesota, don't go to Ottawa in the wintertime. Now, the Rideau Canal is really kind of cool. It's this canal running through the center of the city, and it freezes over in the wintertime. It freezes solid, like 15, 20 feet deep. And you can go skating on it. And there's all kinds of pond hockey games going on, and there's folks selling things on the ice, and it's really very much a carnival kind of atmosphere. And on a bright, sunny day, it's still cold, but on a sunny day, on a weekend in Rideau Canal, it seems like half the population of Ottawa is out skating on the canal or out enjoying themselves on the canal. So it's actually quite a fun thing to do. But yeah, otherwise, don't go to Ottawa. Now, if you have a choice between Ottawa and Toronto, go to Ottawa. This is what Parliament Hill normally looks like It's a big, beautiful space, a big, wide open space, and they'll have like the national yoga. I think this was a picture of some sort of yoga competition in Parliament Hill. That's the way we should remember Parliament Hill is this area it's the Canadian National Commons. It's the place where we gather. It's where we have big ceremonies, where we have the national fireworks on July 1st, where we will greet the Queen and the Pope and those kinds of things. As Sherry says, she saw her first concert there. Exactly. Think of Parliament Hill that way. Macman says, do they get a lot of wind off the lake or something to make it that cold? That's a good question, Macman. I don't know. I don't know, because Buffalo is on Lake Erie, I think. And I don't think Buffalo gets that bone-chilling cold. I know they get a lot of snow. I don't know if Buffalo gets as cold as Ottawa. Yeah, it's not a lake, it's just a river. Yeah, it's not on any of the Great Lakes, is it, Sherry? I don't think so. Yeah, it's not. It's not on one of the Great Lakes. As always, send us emails to onair@yourmaclifeshow.com if you'd like to ask a question to myself or Jim or make a comment or whatever it might be. As I always say, I love getting questions from you guys. So please send us emails to onair@yourmaclifeshow.com. You can do that anytime. You can do it during the live show right now. You can do it if you're listening to the archive. Please do. Actually, hopefully I'll have a chance to. This show might go long, just to warn you ahead of time. Hopefully I'll have a chance to do it. Terry sent us a funny little email about her breaking her iPad. We'll we'll read her email on the air, hopefully a little bit later on in the show. As always, you can go to the website at yourmaclifeshow.com. It's a free podcast. You can sign up. You can subscribe to it on the iTunes store. You can leave a review if you'd like. I don't much care about the reviews, but they help other folks decide whether or not they want to listen to the show. So if you've never left a review, or if it's been a while since you left a review on the iTunes store, please, go ahead and do that if you have the opportunity. But you can support Your Mac Life by donating $2, $5, $10, $15, whatever it might be a month via PayPal or your major credit card. Left-hand side of the website, yourmaclifeshow.com. You see a little button there. You click on that. It takes you to your PayPal account or to a credit card, and you can monthly send in $2, $5, $10, $15 a month, however you so choose. I'd appreciate you guys doing that. That'd be great if you could do that. Also, did Amplified again this morning. I'm now officially the second banana to Jim Dalrymple on Jim's show Amplified. You can also find that on the iTunes store. Do a search for Amplified on the iTunes store, or go to loopinsight.com and do a search for Amplified there, and you will find it. Later on in the show, we'll have a eulogy for Macworld Expo, and we're also going to be talking about broken iPads and how to get them fixed. But up next, we're going to talk to our good friend Jim Dalrymple from the Loop at loopinsight.com about all this stuff and much, much more. This is Your Mac Life.
Your Mac Life.
I heard you. I saw you on Twitter that you said you actually talked to Tim Cook. That must have been a big thrill for him. I've been working on that line all night long, man. Welcome back, folks. This is Your Mac Life. I am Shawn King. In our phone, we've got our good friend Jim Dalrymple from The Loop at loopinsight.com. Jim, how you doing?
Well, I've been better, to be honest.
Why? What's up? What's wrong?
So I flew back to Canada,
Yeah.
and I go into Tim Hortons, and you know, Canada. There's one kind of coffee in Canada.
Yeah.
Tim Hortons.
Yeah.
That's it. You go to Starbucks, there's like 80 different kinds of coffee,
Yep.
and no, that's not the way it is.
Yep.
There's one. So I go in and I say medium double cream, and the guy said, "Would you like regular or our new dark roast?" Shut the hell up and give me a coffee. I don't want any new dark roast. What are you talking about?
That's right. You haven't seen the new commercials that Tim Hortons has been running up here in Canada, pimping that new dark roast stuff, have you?
No.
So you're not going to try it? I thought you would like your coffee dark. I thought you'd appreciate dark roast Tim Hortons.
Well, no. I just want a regular Tim Hortons coffee.
Just want coffee-flavored coffee.
Just give me a coffee.
I honestly don't
start all that.
I honestly don't get the whole hazelnut vanilla flavoring thing that I think Starbucks started it. Now you can get it in Tim Hortons and things like that. That just kind of bothers me. I like my coffee flavored. Why do you need to have your coffee, which already has a flavor, to be hazelnut flavored or vanilla flavored or tulip flavored, whatever it might be?
Exactly.
I don't get that.
The reason that you get a coffee is for coffee flavor.
Exactly.
Why are you going to get a coffee and then hide the coffee taste with, hazelnut banana earth? No, I don't want dirt in my coffee.
Now, I get why tea has different flavors, because there's different kinds of tea. There's chamomile tea, and there's different ways of making tea, but that's fine.
Like black tea.
Yeah.
Black tea.
Red rose tea.
That's it. Red rose tea.
Red rose tea. That's what I've been drinking. If I have to have tea, I used to drink tea a lot when I was a kid, but if I have to have tea now because I'm not feeling well, it's red. I've got a package of red rose tea in the cupboard, and if I need tea, that's it. Red rose, not chamomile, not English breakfast, not Tilly's, not red frickin' rose.
Yep, that's the way it should be.
Exactly. This sounds like a couple of grumpy old men, man.
Well, see, now I'm all upset because the guy asked me if I want a dark roast. No, I just want a Tim Hortons coffee.
To be fair, though, looking at you look like you'd be a dark roast kind of guy.
Well, I do actually like dark roast coffee. I do.
Yeah.
But not Tim Hortons. That's like saying, would you like your Big Mac on a regular bun or a new whole wheat bun? Shut up. Give me a Big Mac.
That's right. It's a big frickin' Mac. I don't care what damn bun it comes on.
God, come on. You don't have a Big Mac on a whole wheat bun. Not even a hippie would do that.
Do hippies actually go into a McDonald's?
I don't know.
No, do I? I don't much care. Let's. We talked about it in depth this morning on Amplified, and again, folks, you can go to the iTunes store and do a search for Amplified, and Jim's comments on the iPad Air 2 and iPad Mini 3 are there. He's also got a review up on the website loopinsight.com if you want to check that out. The only other thing I remember thinking about when you and I were talking about the iPad Air 2 in particular this morning was when we talked about the feel of it, that you said you could tell the difference in like a blind taste test. If you close your eyes, you could tell the difference in the two. Have you used it in any kind of length of time over a couple of hours or anything like that where you would notice the weight difference to be significant?
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I don't think there's enough of a weight difference. I've seen some other folks mention it and comment on it, but I don't think there's enough of a weight difference between the two to make it significant for those folks who either thought it was too heavy to begin with, or this new one is plenty light.
Yeah, and I don't know about that part of it.
I don't know if you know her personally, but over at Recode, there is what I can only describe as a trainee journalist, a woman named Dawn Chmielewski, who has written some remarkably stupid things over the last few weeks at Recode.com. One of the things she wrote before the announcement of the new iPads, she wrote, "Does the Apple iPad still matter?" Answer that question, Jim.
Of course it does. Of course it does.
Is it a dumb question?
Well, yeah, it is.
I don't understand why. I don't understand why Recode would even ask the question. It is a product, from a financial point of view, that makes Apple millions and millions of dollars every quarter. It's a product that leads the way when it comes to consumer tablets. Everyone copies what Apple does with the iPad. So in that regard, consumers love it. They've sold more. I think Tim Cook said they've sold more iPads in the first 4 years of iPad in existence than they sold iPhones in the first 4 years of the iPhone's existence.
Well, and wasn't it the iPad that they're outselling all of the PCs?
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
the iPad is also outselling all of the PC makers. It's sold about 70 million iPads.
It's something we've talked about before. Do you consider the iPad a PC, a personal computer? And
right.
And I don't know how you couldn't. It's a computer, and it sure as hell is more personal than anything else I've ever used.
Your iPhone is a personal computer.
Yeah, absolutely. And
it's probably more powerful than the first Mac I had.
Oh yeah, no kidding. Absolutely. Oh yeah, I think
and that's where I think that people have to be careful about saying that the iPad is falling off a cliff and all this kind of garbage that they're saying. I think the fact is it's too early to know what the upgrade cycle of an iPad is. For people like you and I and other people that listen to this show, maybe it could be that the upgrade cycle is every year, because that's what we do. We watch tech and talk about it. So it could be every year for us. But the average user, what is the upgrade cycle for them? That could be more along the lines of the PC user.
Yeah, yeah.
Not a phone, which, God, we go through phones like crazy.
Yeah.
We'll chop those things up and throw them in the garbage and get a new one just because there's a new feature on them, which is great for Apple because they all usually come out with some great new features on the phone.
Yeah.
So
I think the other aspect of this that people really don't conceptualize and get is what you were saying before about the PC, that it's kind of like the upgrade cycle on the PC, but it's also an upgrade cycle of I'll upgrade my device when the software requires it. So in other words, you upgraded your PC when, say, Photoshop, a new version of Photoshop came out, and your old Macintosh was too slow to run Photoshop, so you upgraded your PC. You upgraded your laptop when a new version of Aperture came out, and you needed it to run it more powerfully, or video editing software, Final Cut Pro, things like that. That's really not the case with the iPad. There's no pressing need for anyone who's got a previous version of the iPad, except for the iPad 1 and maybe the iPad 2, to upgrade. Because you can run iOS 8. You can do almost anything except Touch ID that you could in iOS 8. Now, that's going to change with the new Metal graphics package that Apple has. That demonstration of Pixelmator, and I know you're friends with the guys at Pixelmator, and if you talk to them, tell them congratulations, because that was a great demo of them. That
was a beautiful demo.
It really was. That's an app that you and I have talked about before, and I always recommend to photo editors, if you think you need Photoshop, buy Pixelmator first, because Pixelmator will do about 75% of what Photoshop will do at a tenth of the price. It's a great application. So if you know what, if Pixelmator came out and said, "Hey, this app will only run on the iPad Air 2," I'd buy an Air 2.
Yeah.
So if the software requires it, that's when I'll upgrade. But as long as the software does not require it and the hardware is just really cool stuff as opposed to necessary stuff, I can't see me upgrading my iPad Air. But that's just me. That's not people who...
See, and that's exactly it right there. It's just you. But for me, my requirements on upgrading are different than yours.
Yep.
You know, your mothers are going to be different than both of us, because that may be, you know, maybe I use my iPad for email, for surfing the web, and Facebook, and that's it. That's all I use it for. Well, that'll last me for years.
Yep.
Years and years, if that's all I use it for. And you know what? When the next version of the OS comes out and it doesn't work on the iPad that I have, who cares?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's where we may be now. People are looking at it and saying, well, I use it to surf and I use it for a couple of other things. Well, I don't need all the whiz-bang things that are out there, and, you know, metal and all that kind of, I'm not going to play games on it, and I don't need that, so I don't need to upgrade because it works perfectly well. And the overhead on an iPad is so low in comparison that I think people can do that. And, you know, it's kind of where I think we are.
I would love to see Apple do an experiment, and in one rev of the iPhone or of the iPad, and no offense to you, Jim, but don't give review units to the usual suspects. Give them to random people on the street. Just people whose blogs that you have read, that Apple has read, that people are good writers, and give them to average, everyday people and see if the reviews would be different. I think part of the problem is I read these reviews and they come from the point, not yours, because you know, I like you, but the reviews I see from folks who are jaded, even at a young age, hardcore techies, whining about the fact that there's not enough in this new iPad Air or this new Mini to make it worth the while for me to upgrade. I don't think this isn't the device for you then. This isn't the point. You're missing who Apple is going to sell this to.
Yeah, and, you know, I often talk to people like that, you know, about music stuff and you know, iPads and iPhones, and you know, they can't seem to nail down exactly what it is that is missing, but yet something is missing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, that's not good enough. And you know, even if there are a list of features, okay, let's talk about those. What is it that you would use these features for? Well, I don't know, but it would be cool. Okay, well, that's not good enough. You know, because this is the type of stuff that Tim Cook and Phil Schiller and Johnny Ive sit down and say, okay, what do we need in this next iPad? You know, we need Touch ID. Is that possible? Well, of course. Well, then we should do that. Okay, let's put in Touch ID. Do we really need anything else in the Mini? Not really.
Yeah.
Works great. Sells great. It's powerful. Everybody seems to like it. So, yeah, I'm not thinking that we need anything more. Okay, then we're done. You know, now let's work on the Air 2. What do we need there? You know, and that's what it should be all about. Mm-hmm. Not, you can't please all the whiny little pissants out there that want to see, you know, these wacky features and stuff for no other reason than just to have it. The worst thing that you can do is put out a product that is just full of checklist items.
Yeah. And that's certainly what
Tim Hortons got me all upset tonight.
Well, good. I like you upset. You seem
now you know, I'm all pissed off, and you know, because he asked me if I wanted dark roast.
Then again, to be fair, it doesn't take a lot to piss you off.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean it's a slow burn for you, or a quick burn for you. That's for sure. Let's talk about Apple's earnings reports again. I sound like a broken record on this, but it's the same thing. It's the same thing over and over and over and over again. Apple makes insane amounts of money. They sell stupid amounts of iPhones. They sell quite a few iPads. Yeah, iPad sales have dropped a little bit, but they still sold 12 million iPads in 3 months. Now, pick any other manufacturer, and they would give up their children to sell that many in 3 months, let alone have that be a 12% decline from the previous months. They've sold 5.5 million Macintoshes. That used to be a good decade for Apple. And oh, by the way, they sold 2.6 million iPods. Who the hell is still buying iPods?
I know.
I mean, yes, it's down 24%. I guess I understand that. But who is still buying iPods?
Well, I think that there's still a market for iPods for kids. I think that there's still a market for iPods for people. I understand there are people that do this exercise thing, and they like to listen to music. I think it should be banned myself.
I completely agree with you.
But there are those out there that like to do that. So, there's still a market. Most of us now, with the increased battery life on the iPhone, most of us can just use our iPhones as an iPod.
Sure, yeah.
There was a time when that wasn't true, though.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right.
And for me, it did all come down to battery life.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
That's what it was all about. Because if I sat in a plane and listened to music for 4 or 5 hours, by the time I got to my destination, my phone was dead.
Yeah.
I can't have that. So I'd have a separate iPod to listen to music, and then my phone for phone calls.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But now, I don't need that.
I just find it so frustrating that these people who are in theory getting paid a lot of money are on important websites and being on TV with CNBC and these kinds of folks still keep pimping the exact same dumb stories they've been doing for at least the last 5 years. Oh, Apple isn't innovating. Oh, Apple isn't doing this. Well, you know what? They're making more money than anyone else on the freaking planet. They're selling more devices, 1.2 billion iOS-type devices, iPhones, iPads, and iPods. 1.2 billion in the last 13 years. If you say anything negative about Apple without backing it up with real live evidence, I should be able to punch you in the face.
Well, I'll say it again. I think that these people that call out companies that are making billions in profit, any company, I don't care if you're talking Samsung or not, even though they went down 60%, but I won't bring that up right now.
Too
late.
late.
If a company's making billions in profit, then just shut up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, there's a difference, and somebody said it. I don't know. Maybe it was you this morning that said a lot of the reviewers review the product they wish they had.
Yeah, it was me.
As opposed to the product they actually have. A review is about reviewing the product that you have, and if it's missing features that make it non-functional, then that's okay. But if you're talking about writing about a story about a product that you wish you had, that's a different piece.
Yeah.
That's an editorial piece. That's
Sure.
when you sit down and say, okay, I have this iPad and, it's really not good. And here's why I think that it's not good and what I would do if I was Tim Cook and in charge of Apple. That's a totally different piece. That's not a review. So
Apple posted quarterly revenue, that means every 3 months, of $42 billion and profit quarterly, $8.5 billion. That used to be the entire company times 4. Not that long ago, Apple lost $1 billion in a quarter. Like, I'm not talking about in the 70s or 80s or 90s. I can sometime, well, sorry, I take it back. 96, I think Apple lost $1 billion in a quarter. So in less than 20 years, not only have they completely rescued the company and turned it around, they've made it the success story of all time. I mean, hopefully there's someone at Harvard Business School is writing a course prospectus on the differences between Apple and BlackBerry, on how two companies that started off in 1996 in completely different ends of the spectrum swapped places and became completely opposite of each other within 20 years.
I remember when Apple made a profit of $1 million,
Yep.
and everybody was doing a happy dance.
That's right. That's right.
You know? So, you know, there's a big difference. And, you know, I think the biggest difference isn't the money. It's that Apple was doing the wrong things back then.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now they're doing the right things, and they're doing them for the right reasons.
The other thing that's going to be really interesting is keep in mind that Apple sold 5.5 Macintoshes in a quarter where they had no new Macintoshes. They've now got a new.
They sold 5.5 Macintoshes?
5.5 million Macintoshes in a quarter where they had
5.5, God. I've got two of them.
in a quarter where they had no new Macintoshes, and now this next quarter, the Christmas quarter, they've got this new, beautiful, fairly expensive, sexy machine that is going to drive purchases of maybe even lower tier machines. They've got new iPhones. The iPhone 6 was only out for 8 days of the previous quarter. Apple is going to have, and this is not a prediction, this is a guarantee, the single greatest quarter I'd say any company's ever had in the next 4 months between now and Christmas.
Oh, yeah. There was only 9 days of iPhone sales on this quarter.
Yeah.
And, you know, those 9 days were record-breaking days.
Yeah, no kidding.
Still. You know, I just want, like, a piece of those 9 days, and I'll retire for life.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah.
Now, say...
They sold 10 million in the first weekend.
Okay. But keep in mind...
At say, $500 each.
Yep.
Give me a piece of that.
There was a Time magazine story that I thought was kind of funny, and it's applicable to this. Would winning the lottery solve all your problems?
Hell yeah.
See, no, now that's not true, Jim. It wouldn't solve all your problems. As I said on Twitter, it would just give me different, better problems.
Well, depending how much the lottery was, I'd buy Tim Hortons and cancel Dark Roast.
It would give me problems I could solve in a villa in Tuscany.
Yeah.
It would give me problems that I could solve by getting in a Ferrari and driving for a few hours.
No doubt.
It's very.
Or you could work for Apple and do that.
Well, yeah, there's that too. I can be Eddie Q, exactly. But it was funny. I was having a discussion with my friend Leslie about this, and she said that there are studies that show after $75,000 per year in, let's say, net in take-home pay, you don't get more happy the more money you have. And I call bullshit on that.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Eddie Q looks pretty happy to me.
Exactly. And I said to her, because at $75,000 per year, I couldn't drive a Ferrari. I couldn't afford one. At $1 million a year, I could afford to drive a Ferrari, and that would make me happy.
Yeah. And it would make me even happier if I had two.
Exactly.
Because then I would have two.
That's right. You know, what's the old line? Money doesn't buy happiness, but it buys a better set of problems.
Yeah. Well, give me the money.
Exactly.
Don't show me the money. Give it to me. I want it.
And the other thing is, the only people who say money doesn't buy happiness are those who already have money. Poor people never say money doesn't buy happiness.
It's true.
Because we at least want to try it out for ourselves. All right? I don't believe you, rich guy. Give me if money doesn't buy happiness, give me your money and you go be happy.
Yeah. And I'll take your money and go be happy.
Exactly. And that makes two of us who are happy.
Yeah.
Now, I understand.
Seems like a win-win to me.
I understand the point. The point is that money in and of itself doesn't buy you happiness. But certainly not having to worry about money makes people happier. Not having to stress out over money makes people happier, to know that you and your family are taken care of. Yes, you're happy because of that situation. And if you can have your family taken care of and be poor, okay, then there's a measure of happiness there. But to have people say money doesn't buy happiness, to have people say that would winning the lottery solve all your problems, and then tell you the answer is no, that's just bullcrap. That's just absolute bullshit. I'm sorry. I have to say it the way it is.
I'm with you.
Yeah. Would you be happier if you were a billionaire or if you were Amish?
Yeah, I'd have my yacht right next to Larry Ellison.
According to statistics, the correct answer is they're both equally happy. And good for the Amish if they can be happy with no money. But I'd rather be a billionaire.
Yeah.
Do you think you'd be happier homeless in Fresno, California, or homeless in Calcutta, India?
Well, Fresno.
Actually, it turns out it's Calcutta. The downtrodden.
Where are you getting this stuff? You're just making this up.
I'm not. I'm gonna post this on the loop in a little while. The downtrodden of Calcutta are far happier than you'd think, even given their circumstances. How can these people possibly be happy? The problem isn't with them; it's with us. We're falling prey to what's called a focusing illusion. All we're thinking about is money and living standards, and not the other factors that are often more responsible for happiness. Again, I call bullshit.
Yeah. What kind of nonsense is that?
That's right. Yeah, I just don't accept. I don't accept the premise that yes, I agree that money can't solve all your problems, but God damn it, it can solve a whole bunch of them. It won't solve all of them, but it'll solve a whole damn bunch of them.
Well.
I can't tell if I lost. There we go. I couldn't tell if I lost you or not. And the other funny story that we heard, and I'm doing these backup stories because I haven't talked to Jim on the show in a while. This is a couple of weeks ago. Did you hear the comments from the Prime Minister of Finland that Apple killed Finland's two biggest industries?
Yes.
Now, I'm sorry. I have friends who are Finnish. Lovely, lovely people. But you people in Finland have a moron for a prime minister. He's saying that paper manufacturing and cell phones, led by then dominant Nokia, were destroyed by Apple.
Well, in actual fact, they destroyed themselves because they stopped making good products.
Exactly. It was completely self-inflicted.
It's the same with BlackBerry. I mean, self-inflicted wounds.
You could kind of make a case, and not a very good one, for the iPhone up against Nokia. But the idea of the iPad destroying the paper industry in Finland is completely idiotic. Utterly, and with no basis in fact whatsoever. Now, maybe this is the Prime Minister saying this for the benefit of the people back home because he's in a re-election cycle or whatever it might be. But from the outside looking in, that's just the dumbest statement I've heard from a politician in a long time. And a lot of dumb politicians out there.
Yeah.
Speaking of paper manufacturing, we heard the sad news a few weeks ago that Glenn Fleischman's The Magazine, which I always thought was an awful name, is shutting down. He gave a number of reasons for that. How is The Loop magazine, Jim? I haven't heard you comment on Glenn's magazine demise. Do you have any comment for the audience on either Glenn's magazine shutting down or the health and fitness of the Loop?
The Loop is holding its own.
Yeah.
The magazine is holding its own. It could be doing a lot better. Newsstand as a thing on the App Store sucks.
Yeah.
I feel terrible for Glenn, and I reached out to Glenn when it happened, because Glenn's a friend. I've known him for years, and I felt bad. I wish that the people would support the magazines that are out there. It's a couple bucks a month, and there's a lot of hard work behind the scenes that goes into making them. So, I really wish that people would do that. But if they're not going to, then these good publications are just going to shut down. And I think Apple needs to make a decision. I said it about in the post I did about Glenn. Apple just needs to fess up and say that they don't give a shit about digital publishing and be done with it.
Yep.
Because that's kind of what I think.
And if nothing else, it would allow folks like you and others to get some direction from Apple. And unfortunately, Apple's notorious for doing these kinds of things. They come out with these really cool techs and really cool products, and then they ignore them. I was in the same boat as Glenn many years ago when Apple came out with a piece of software called QuickTime Broadcasting. And Apple had me beta testing it, and I was NDA'd to death on the stupid thing. And everyone at Apple that I talked to said, yeah, this is going to be the future of broadcasting. This is going to be, you're going to be able to do all this cool stuff with it. I was like, wow, this looks fantastic. And you did it, and it was Yeah, exactly. It was at 1.0 for 2 years. Literally, there weren't even bug fixes that came out for QuickTime Broadcaster. And it limped along and limped along and limped along. And nobody at Apple would ever tell you, oh, no, dude, that product is dead. Stop developing for it. Stop working on it. But because we're Mac fans, we kept using it. We kept trying to build a better product using these old tools until Apple literally said nothing about it. They just stopped talking to us about it. And the same thing is happening with Newsstand. Apple, don't do this. You screw people over when you do this.
Yep.
It's great when they come out with really cool new technology, but when those of us start to, I know the argument for some folks is, well, you shouldn't rely on Apple. Well, to do cool stuff, sometimes you have to. But Apple shouldn't also screw over those people.
Yep.
Folks, check out loopinsight.com, Amplifieds on the iTunes store. Do a search for that. I am the second banana. Jim is, as always, the top banana. We talked this morning about all this stuff and a bunch of stuff about guitar. I'm getting more into the guitar thing, Jim. I know you're a big music guy. So I'm trying to increase my knowledge of music and guitars, and so we'll ramp that up on Amplified as time goes on. I don't have nearly the breadth of knowledge that Dan does, but I'll get there eventually.
No, we had a good talk about guitars and stuff.
Good. I'm learning more. Until next week, Jim, thanks very much for being here, buddy. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Shawn.
All right, talk to you later. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was Jim Dalrymple from Loop at loopinsight.com. I didn't ask Jim about this because we've talked about it enough that we know Jim's viewpoint on this Macworld Expo. The folks at IDG, I don't even know what IDG stands for. The folks at IDG announced in the past couple of weeks that Macworld Expo was going to be no more, that they were shutting it down. They posted on their website the story. We thank you for 30 amazing years. We couldn't have done it without you. Macworld iWorld will not take place in 2015, and the show is going on hiatus. Okay, first of all, it's not going on hiatus. Macworld iWorld is dead. Why IDG won't just step up and say this, I don't know. I don't know if there's contracts. I don't know if there's something behind the scenes. But I'm telling you right now, the Macworld Expo, that I'm going to continue to call it that, the Macworld Expo that many of us knew and many of us attended, many of us loved, is never coming back. That kind of show may never come back. If only because the market for a Macworld Expo has gone away. There's no need anymore for this kind of all-encompassing trade show. Remember, Macworld Expo was targeted at everybody who used a Macintosh. Everyone from the person who had just bought a new Mac at their local Apple store, all the way up to a 30-year tech veteran who used Macs in a IT setup, or that university administrator who had 5,000 Macintoshes under their command, to the user group folks, to the graphic designers, to the musicians, to the photographers, to school kids, to schools. Macworld Expo had to cover that entire range. And they did it to varying degrees of success in varying years. They always tried. There's no doubt about that. They always wanted to cover as much of that territory as they could. Unlike other shows. Photoshop World, you know what that's about. It's about Photoshop. IT World is about IT. CES, consumer electronics. Photo Plus, about photo stuff. All these other shows are highly targeted to a particular section of the market. Macworld Expo wasn't. It was everybody. I still remember the very first Macworld Expo I ever went to. I think it was 1997 in New York City in the Javits Center. And walked into the Javits Center, and here was this room, possibly up to that moment in my life, the biggest room I'd ever been in my entire life. This place was huge. It felt like an airplane hangar. And from the front door to the back wall and from side to side was nothing but Mac stuff. And every single piece of it ran on my Macintosh. Everything did. I didn't have to find a sales clerk and say, is this Macintosh compatible? Will this plug into my ADB port? Can this printer work with my Mac? Do you have drivers for this? All that hassle we had to go through at our local consumer electronics show, our consumer electronics stores like Best Buy and Future Shop and CompUSA and that kind of stuff. You know, some of us are old enough to remember going into a Future Shop or a CompUSA or a Best Buy and seeing that huge wall of software, a boxed software. And then if you were lucky, off in the corner, a little tiny, maybe 5 boxes by 5 boxes, the Mac stuff. Oh, look, they have Mac software. And you were so excited. And you go over and you know. So imagine the feeling you got walking on the show floor of Macworld Expo and having it be just jam full. And then there was another whole airplane hangar on the other side with more Mac stuff. The co-host of the show at the time was Adam. And Adam and I wandered around just agog. Adam, who was a Unix guy at the time, he said, I didn't even know there was this much Mac stuff available on the planet, let alone in one building. And it was for everything. You know, you'd walk down the aisles and there'd be the guy selling IT software, and then there'd be a guy over here selling you hard drives, and then there'd be a company back here selling software for photo editing, and then someone over here selling money management software, and it was everywhere. It was great. It was amazing. But then, what became more important than the stuff on the show floor, as we became more, I don't want to say known in the Macintosh community, but certainly as we started to learn more people and be associated with more people, was meeting people on the show floor. That was the best part of Macworld Expo. The last few years I went, I dreaded the show floor because I knew there wasn't going to be a lot of stuff there that was new to me. I knew I was getting, I'd gotten jaded and nothing really excited me and things like that. But it was the people that made me want to come back to Macworld Expo every single year. Not just the famous people, not just meeting and becoming friends with Sinbad, not just bumping into Robin Williams on the show floor and chatting with him, not just interviewing Herbie Hancock and Steven Tyler. Not those people. And not just the famous people of the Macintosh community who became friends. Chris Breen and Andy Ihnatko and Adam Angst and Tanya Angst and those well-known names. But it was the listeners of the show. I hope she's still in the IRC chat room. Let me check to make sure. Oh, she's not. I still remember our friend Lesh. And we're standing there on the show floor, and this woman walks up to me, and she goes, "Hi, are you Shawn King?" "Yeah, I am. What's your name?" And she says, "I'm Leslie." And she had the look on her face like she knew me, but I didn't know her. And she could tell that I didn't know who she was. And she looked at me, and she just covered her eyes up. Well, Leslie's avatar on our forums was just her very, very pretty blue eyes, bright blue eyes. It was that all it was, and I went, "Lesh!" I didn't know her real name. I knew her by her avatar name. I knew her by the name that she went with online. I was like, "Oh, Lesh, I finally get to meet you." And finally getting to meeting so many other listeners. People who'd listened to the show for years and years and years. Who I finally got to sit down and chat with. That was always the best part of a Macworld Expo. It wasn't the parties. It wasn't the behind-the-scenes stuff. It wasn't, meeting and talking to Steve Jobs or Phil Schiller. Those people they're important, but they're not that important to me. It was hanging out with listeners. And that's what I'll miss most about a Macworld Expo, is because it brought together such a wide range of people in the community, that if you had a wide range of friends, you met and hung out with and had a beer with and had breakfast with and chatted with a wide range of people. Why is Macworld Expo going away? Well, the easy answer is I2G couldn't make enough money at it. That's the simple answer. The more complicated answer is obviously more complicated. The reasons why I2G couldn't make more money at it are many and varied. I knew I2G was in trouble. I knew Macworld Expo was on life support, if not dead, the day that Apple announced they weren't going to be coming, that Steve Jobs wasn't going to be doing the keynote, and Phil Schiller was going to be doing the keynote. This is 2009. Schiller was going to be doing the keynote, and that this was going to be the last Apple keynote ever. Now remember, we had gone through this several times in the past. Macworld Expo Tokyo. A lot of folks, when they talk about Macworld, they forget about the Tokyo Expos. The Tokyo Expos were bigger than either the two East Coast or West Coast US Expos. Significantly bigger, too. Both from a physical size point of view, but also from an attendance point of view. Now, the numbers were never the 100,000 that I2G lied about. Literally lied about. But they were very, very good attendance figures. So, Apple had pulled out of Macworld Tokyo, and that show collapsed. Apple pulled out of Macworld East Coast, the Boston show, and that show collapsed. So, Apple pulling out of the San Francisco show signified to anyone who didn't have a vested interest in Macworld, signaled to them same thing's going to happen. Past his prologue. And I said this right then and there. Past his prologue. This show is going to die. Because Apple's going to pull, no, this one will never, no, it's going to die. And I knew that from talking to the folks at IDG, because they didn't have a clue about what to do without Apple at their show. They didn't know how to redesign the show to make it work without an Apple. Yeah, it's harder. There's no doubt that it's harder to do a show. As I always said, Apple was the black hole of the Macintosh community. That when they showed up to an expo, everything revolved around it and got sucked into it. The media got sucked into it. The showgoers got sucked into it. The vendors got sucked into it. Everyone just gravitated and rotated around Apple. And without that black hole there, it sort of flew apart. Because IDG didn't have a center. They didn't have any way of creating a new black hole, creating a new gravity well, if you will, for these vendors. So 5 minutes after Apple makes that announcement, I go to IDG and say, hey, we need a statement. We need a comment from you guys. Do you want to be interviewed? Do you talk to me? Oh, sorry, we don't have anything right now. Give us 24 hours. I was like, 24 hours? What are you talking about? Well, we didn't see this coming, and we need some time to... What do you mean you didn't see this coming? Macworld Expo Tokyo. Macworld Expo Boston. How could you not see this coming? At every single keynote for the previous 5 years, Apple had been saying, oh, we do more foot traffic in our stores than we do at a Macworld Expo. We have more people coming to our stores every weekend than come to an entire Macworld Expo. That wasn't a hint. That wasn't a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. That was Apple telling IDG, we're out of here. And the reasons why were obvious. I mean, Apple can do their own shows on their own schedule, on their own time frame, whenever they want. All Apple has to do is send out an email invite, and the world's media will come to Cupertino. Apple could tomorrow, Thursday, send out email invites to an event on Friday, and the press will still come. And Apple could just stand up and go, suckers! But the press is still going to come. The other issue was IDG, and I heard this from many, many vendors in the years after Macworld Expo. IDG kept trying to strong-arm vendors financially. IDG knew attendance was going to drop off a cliff without Apple. At least a third of the people weren't going to come back to the show without an Apple there. So if you're charging vendors based on attendance, which is what they do in these shows, if you're charging folks based on attendance, then when attendance is going to drop, you drop your prices. That's just common sense. Well, guess who didn't have common sense? IDG. IDG didn't have common sense because they kept charging vendors the same prices, and it pissed vendors off. Why do you think Griffin Technology left Macworld Expo, went to CES, and Radtech and any number of other companies went to CES? And this is before the iLounge Pavilion at CES. IDG didn't know how to manage the show without an Apple. IDG doesn't know how to manage the show in general. A perfect example is ArcSign says, I wonder if Apple will someday do a Macworld Expo China. Guess what, ArcSign? There is a Macworld Expo in China. Every year. Has been for years. It's in August in Beijing. You didn't know that, did you? Because IDG doesn't promote it. It's not even on their own website. But do a search for Macworld Expo Beijing or Macworld Expo China, and it comes up. Every year for, I want to say at least the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a Macworld Expo in Beijing. Monty says, which is why the conference track was so expensive, makes attendance lower, makes prices higher, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Brian Monroe, Apple will just open more retail stores in China. Tim Cook has said that. They've got 15 stores now in China. They're looking to probably put up to 40 in the next couple of years in China. No, I don't think IDG will do a show in China, not a Macworld. It may be a different name of it, but the Macworld that we know of isn't coming back. IDG has screwed that up. There we go. Brian Monroe at macworldasia.com. So there already is a show in China. But IDG's never told anybody about it. How does this happen? How, we figured out a few years ago that in the, IDG knows that 75% of the people who go to a Macworld Expo live within 100 miles of the Moscone Center in San Francisco. It's a regional show. The perception of it is that it's a worldwide show, but it's not. It's a regional show. So within that 100 miles of the Moscone Center are 5 million people, with San Francisco and San Jose in there. There's 5 million warm bodies there. Now, there are more Mac users now than have ever been. Let's say there's 10% of that population has a Macintosh, or even an iOS device, and that's low. 10% of 5 million is 500,000 people. Let's say 10% of those people would go to a Macworld Expo, are hardcore enough that they'd be interested in this stuff. That's 50,000 people. How can IDG only get less than 15,000 people to go to a Macworld Expo every year? How does that make sense? If the community is getting bigger and bigger, how does your attendance keep getting lower and lower? I don't understand that. Many years ago, IDG wanted to. One of the knocks on Expo is the whole iWorld thing. You know, iPhone case world. Many years ago, IDG wanted to have, for those folks who don't know, the Moscone Center, two parts of it are underground, the Moscone North, Moscone South, and they'll use West sometimes. IDG wanted to have Moscone, I think South, but let's use it for example. Moscone South be all iOS device vendors, and Moscone North be all Macintosh vendors. And they would differentiate that way. And they would actually call it iWorld. There was going to be Macworld Expo and iWorld Expo. Two concurrent expos, but different. Because iWorld encompasses everyone who has an iOS device, even if they don't have a Macintosh. So you could invite PC vendors, PC software vendors, to come and show off their stuff too. But it would have been mostly cases. No doubt about it. It would have been mostly iPhone and iPad cases. So IDG went to Apple and said, hey, this is what we're going to do for next year's Expo. Apple said no. Apple said no. No matter what anyone says, Apple or IDG, Apple ran Macworld Expo. Apple pushed around executives at IDG. I could tell you all kinds of horror stories of Phil Schiller yelling at people from IDG's management team, saying, no, you can't do this or you can't do that, screaming at them, telling them they could not run the show the way IDG wanted to run the show. And IDG would back down every time. They had no balls when it came to standing up to Apple. Oh, and guess what? They left anyway. Because that was the concern. IDG said, well, if we don't do what Apple wants us to do, they'll leave. They left anyway. They were going to leave anyway. So why not do the show you want to do without them? Why let them prevent you from doing the show you want to do when they're going to leave anyway? MacMan says, because IDG was run by idiots. Ampersand, I won't say that about Paul Kent, who's done his dead level best. Paul's a good dude. He may not be a good dude, Brian Monroe says, but they really messed up not knowing how to transition to a post-Apple Expo world. I think Paul Kent's a great guy. He was, past tense, a friend of mine. But Paul Kent took criticism of Macworld Expo far too personally. He took criticism of Expo as if it was criticism of him personally. Not of the job he was doing, not of his employment, not of his boss, but of him personally. One time I was saying this similar kind of stuff about Macworld Expo, and Paul Kent called me a chicken shit weasel on Twitter. All right, you know what? Maybe I am, but dude, you're the vice president of marketing in IDG. You don't say that kind of stuff on Twitter publicly. I challenged IDG on several occasions to prove the things they were saying. Back, I want to say 6-7 years ago, IDG audited their attendance figures, which means that they counted as best they could the number of people that went to a show. The year before, they hadn't been auditing. The year before, they announced 60,000 people. The year of the audit, 35,000 people. Well, that's weird. How'd they lose 25,000 people? Well, they didn't lose 25,000 people. They just counted more accurately. And they went on like that for a few years until Apple pulled out and IDG went back to the non-audited numbers. And magically, the numbers went up again. Isn't that cool? So I challenged Paul Kent. I said, why aren't you auditing these numbers anymore? Give people a reason. Give your vendors a reason to believe your numbers. He didn't like that. He passed me off to someone else at IDG, and they refused to give me an answer. My criticism of Paul when Apple pulled out and Paul called a town hall meeting where everyone was invited to come and talk to him and tell him where they thought Macworld Expo should be going in the future was the most useless hour of my life. Paul, we're not conference organizers. We don't know what you can and can't do. And Paul basically should have stood up and said, tell us what you want us to do that won't cost us any money, because we're not going to pay for anything. I told Paul Kent, here's an easy way to juice attendance at Macworld Expo. Simple. Watch this. You sign up for a contest. And in that contest, once a day, they give away something. It could be an iPhone. It could be an iPad. It could be a MacBook Air. Once a day at the end of the show, you do a drawing, a live drawing. You've got to be there to win. That'd be kind of cool, wouldn't it? That would get people to hang around till the end of the show. Then, on the last day of the show, the same drawing, the prize, and again, you give away a MacBook, let's say a MacBook Pro. But your grand prize, the grand prize for someone who would win that day, would be one thing from every single vendor. Everything from an iPhone case all the way up to a G drive, terabyte hard drive, and everything in between. Wouldn't that be a cool prize? That would be about $50,000 worth of stuff. They're not going to hand it to you right there, but they ship it to your home later on. But that would generate excitement, wouldn't it? I told Paul Kent, here's another thing. Get all of these podcasters together to promote a contest where one of their listeners would win an all-expense-paid trip to Macworld Expo. You'd pay their airfare, you'd pay their hotel, you give them some spending money, and they get to hang out with their favorite podcaster. You'd have, 20 different podcasts pimping this thing to, 30,000, 40,000, 100,000 people? This isn't hard, folks. This isn't hard to do. It costs a little bit of money. But people would come to the show floor to win one of everything. They'd listen to podcasts. They'd enter podcasts if they thought they could win an all-expense-paid trip to San Francisco. Make no mistake about it. Apple did not kill Macworld Expo. IDG killed Macworld Expo through mismanagement. And whether that mismanagement was from Paul Kent himself directly or from the grown-ups above him who wouldn't let Paul do what he wanted to do, it doesn't matter. It's still on IDG. That Macworld Expo, the greatest trade show in the world because of the people that attended it, is dead. And I'm very sorry to hear that. I'm very sorry to have to say those words, and I'm very sorry that this might mean it's the last chance I ever get to hang out with some of you, listeners to Your Mac Life and Amplified and whatever the hell else I do. I loved meeting listeners and friends on the show floor. And it's unlikely that's ever going to happen again. So for that, I blame IDG. And the other thing is, Sly put on such great parties at Macworld Expo. We had fun at our parties at Macworld Expo. We had, Sinbad show up to our party at Expo. We had the Silicon Valley House Rockers. We had people from the movie Godfather that was the coolest part. Remember that, Sly? The I don't know who the guy was, but he was an actor who for those folks who are fans of The Godfather, you remember the scene where I've forgotten his name now. The henchman gets strangled in the bar, and they send him that note. Send the Godfather that note of the fishes. So and so lives with or sleeps with the fishes now. Well, the guy who strangled the bad guy was at our party one year. Yeah, I know he was like he didn't have a name. He was a third level character, but it was still kind of cool to hang out with some guy, and he looked like a Godfather too. Oh man, I think he was an ex New York City cop, but his face was going east, and his nose was going north. He looked like a hard guy. Send us your emails, your thoughts and feelings about Macworld Expo. If you had a chance to go, or if you didn't have a chance to go, why didn't you go? That's one of the things too. Is that because people didn't go, vendors didn't see value in it. But because there weren't enough vendors, people didn't go, and because there weren't enough vendors, the press didn't go as much as before. It was a cycle. It was a vicious circle that once it started spiraling down the bowl. After 2009, 2010 was when we all sort of sat around and as media going. And the thing was, in 2010, we knew this was going to happen, and yet none of the other media guys had enough balls to say it. Leo Laporte didn't say it, even though he said it to me privately. Oh, this show's dead. He went on Mac Break Weekly the next Monday and said, "Oh, it was the greatest show we've ever had. This is going to go on forever." Ted Landau said to me privately, "Oh man, this show is dead." Ted Landau wrote in Mac Observer the next day, "This was a great show with fantastic attendance." These guys didn't have enough balls to stand up and say what they thought privately in public. And that's part of the problem. Because all Paul Kent heard was these media sycophants blowing smoke up his ass with just this one angry Canadian saying, no, the Emperor has no clothes. Well, the Emperor ignored the one angry Canadian because he was being drowned out by the ass kissers at TUAW and Mac Observer and Macworld and every other Mac publication because they all wanted Expo to succeed. Well, guess what, guys? If you wanted Expo to succeed, you should have worked harder to make it better. You knew what was going wrong with Macworld Expo. I know you knew because I talked to you about it. You told me the same things that I was thinking about it. You all knew the story of the attendance lies. I told that story directly to the editor-in-chief of Mac Observer. I told it directly to the editor-in-chief of TUAW. I told it directly to every single Mac website who wanted to listen to me. Did any of them write that story? No. Because none of them wanted to piss off Paul Kent. Well, look what that got you guys. Look where that got you. It got you no show. So congratulations. You didn't piss off Paul Kent, and you helped kill a show. Good for you. Slow clap for the ass-kissing Mac media. Nice job, asshats. Monty says, I sent Paul an email after my first expo telling him why I went. I spent a lot of time crafting that message to get my point across quickly and simply. I never heard back from him. I did the same thing to him in person when I met him. He smiled and walked off. Yep. Again, personally, I love Paul Kent. I wish we were still friends. I wish he wouldn't take criticism personally, but he does. He took criticism of Macworld Expo as a personal affront to him. To him. Not to IDG, but to him. So he couldn't take criticism. I went off on a little rant there, didn't I? A little bit. Okay. Let's dial it back. Bring it back. But yeah, I want to hear what do you guys think of the demise of Macworld Expo? Do you think that there will be another show like it? I'd love for there to be. I'd love to be. I don't think we're going to ever have a show like it. You can still have shows. You can still have trade shows and expos. And again, Photo Plus and Photoshop World and IT World and the OOL conference. There is room for smaller conferences. I don't think we're going to see a conference with the style, scope, and breadth of a Macworld Expo ever again. I was going to say something else. I forgot what it was. Let's do some emails from you folks. I wanted to make sure I got to this. Terry Schurter. Is Terry still in the IRC chat room? Yes, Terry's still there. Terry says, I pre-ordered a space gray 120 gigabyte iPad Air 2 with AppleCare and a black cover, which apparently she got today. I've attached photos of my old iPad 3rd generation model, which I had bought to replace my iPad 1st generation model. I handed my iPad 1 to my husband, who refuses to spend his money on technology and depends on me to buy new stuff so he can inherit my old stuff. Terry, your husband sounds like Sly's brother Peter. He does the same thing. He waits for Sly to buy new stuff and takes Sly's hand-me-downs. She said the Apple event this week was what made this a very painful purchase to make because I definitely want the iMac with Retina display. My iMac is over 3 years old. My MacBook is over 5 years old. I've actually gotten quite good at delaying gratification, starting with waiting for the iPhone to come to Verizon. My husband has been complaining about the old iPad for months now. I've been promising him that he only had to wait till November for release, so I didn't have a choice. You'll notice something wrong with my iPad. It fell out of my Air desk a few times, Terry. And one of those times, it shattered. Here's a picture. You before. Your quilts are beautiful. Oh my goodness, folks. Look at some of the quilt patterns that Terry has at hexylady.com. Just beautiful. Now, Terry, are these just pictures or are these your actual quilting fabrics and designs? Because some of these, Terry, are just beautiful with some amazing textures on them. I'm just trying to see from your website, Terry. You can tell me real quick. Do you take these as orders? Do you sell these? Give the audience a bit of a sense of what you do with your quilts. Sherry says, "Oh man, bookmarking that site. I've been thinking about making a quilt. They're really pretty. I've got a quilt that my stepmom made when I was like 17. I still got that quilt. I still love that quilt. It was a hand-me-down quilt from my step-grandmother. I never thought of her as my step-grandmother. She was always Grandma Smith, who made the most delicious molasses cookies ever. Oh, Grandma Smith molasses cookies were just, they were heaven. And so Grandma Smith knew I loved that quilt. And when she passed, my stepmom, my mom, got it. And then when I moved back to Canada, my stepmom finally gave it to me. It's on my bed now. I love that quilt. Beautiful pattern. I love quilts. Quilts are just so cool. And I also remember as a kid hanging out with my grandmother at her quilting bees. And for me, it was a really neat thing just to sit there. I was doing my homework or reading a book, but I was sitting in the corner. And there was these 10, 15 ladies quilting. And they're mostly gossiping. They're mostly talking about the neighborhood and who did this and whose husband was doing this and blah, blah, blah kind of stuff. But it was just kind of neat to be there in that community listening to the quilters. I know they still do quilting bees in various places. Terry says, those are my actual quilt designs, but those are fabrics I bought. A quilt will take about 1,000 hours to make. The technique I do is called English paper piecing. Everything is hand stitched. Terry, do you sell those? That's got to be, because 1,000 hours, wow, that's significantly expensive. If you'll, and worth it. I'll tell you that. They look beautiful. They look like they'd be worth it. So, thanks, Terry, for that. Glad you got your new iPad. Glad your husband got your old one. Martin Rice, since I installed Yosemite, every time I plug my iPad and iPhone in, iPhoto opens. In iPhoto's general preferences, I have connecting with opens, no application chosen. Has anyone else noticed this? Yeah. It's one of those things that Apple does almost every release. It's like when you do a new version of iOS, they turn Bluetooth on. Stop doing that, Apple. Stop it. Stop it. If I install a new piece of OS system software and you notice I've got things turned off, don't turn them back on without asking my permission. Yosemite is the same way. There's a bunch of stuff on Yosemite. It's like, why is this happening? Oh, because Apple turned it on when I had it off. So in this case, Martin, open up your app called Image Capture. I don't know why iMessage is opening up. Don't. Oh, because I typed I am. Stop it. Image Capture. The Image Capture app also has a preference, Martin. You can, in the lower right-hand... unless something's plugged... Unless a device is plugged in, it won't show me the preferences. Jesus, Apple. So I open up, I plug in my iPhone, and in the lower left-hand corner, Martin, it tells you what the device is. In my case, it's iPhone 5S. And then it says, connecting this iPhone opens. And then you've got a choice. You can choose aperture, image capture, preview, auto import, or no application. So Martin, choose what it is that you want this app to do. For me, it's no application. Because I don't want my iPhone opening up an application every time I plug in my iPhone to charge it or to do whatever it is I'm going to do with it. That's just dumb. I don't need it to do that. So Martin, give that a try. You have to turn it off both in iPhoto general preferences, but also in image capture. The other thing is I never used iPhoto, so I realized that, I don't know, was in the Yosemite install or whatever it might be, iPhoto was still around. I compressed it, turned it into a zip file, and threw away the original. So, Monty says, can I just say I hate the new UI in Yosemite? Good God, it's ugly. And MacMan says, it's grown on me since I started using the betas. Yeah, that's something we'll talk about on next week's show. Send me your Yosemite gripes. The things you like and things you don't like about Yosemite. I've got a bunch. There's a few things that annoy me. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll know what I'm talking about. So send me your Yosemite gripes, and we'll talk about it on next week's show. Send that off to onair@yourmaclifeshow.com. Folks, that's it for this week's show. Show number 1029. Thanks very much to our good friend Jim Dalrymple from The Loop at loopinsight.com for joining us. And thanks to you guys for being here each and every week, whether you're tuned in live or whether you're tuned in via the archive. I appreciate each and every one of you guys who sit through all of this stuff each and every week. And again, our thoughts and prayers go to our friends and fellow Canadians in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. Until next week, as always, I've been Shawn King, and you've been listening to Your Mac Life. See ya!